the static clears. Unwanted brotherhood of tears. Grief can weigh us down alone, but here we find a common home. The voices speak to heart and soul. In darker times they make us whole. Through Jesus' light we find our way. In every night there comes a day. From shadows to the dawn we rise, hope reflected in our eyes.
Well, thanks so much for joining us again on the Unwanted Fraternity podcast. I'm Jen Tonkinson, and I'm here with my always amazing co-host, Greg Tonkinson, my husband, and we are just so excited you're joining us again for yet another episode. Before we start, just want to give a shout out to the Herzog Foundation. We are so grateful for their partnership. If you do not know about the Herzog Foundation, they are an incredible organization that desires greatly to equip parents and leaders and educators with the tools that they need to equip this next generation of young people. They have many, many podcasts on their network. If you go to herzogfoundation.com/podcast, you can see all the different varieties that they have and listen on to some of those. Well, today, Greg, we are continuing our conversation on getting married in a blended family.
Yeah, you said that with like your voice just kind of went
down.
Yeah, just like
getting married.
There you go.
And blending your family.
I like that a little better. Yeah.
A little catchier.
Like getting married.
Well, I mean, I say it like that, like it's so exciting right at the very beginning.
Yeah.
You're like, this is going to be epic. This is going to be amazing. This is going to be the best thing ever. And then, as we all know, those of you who are in blended families, it's always, or it's not so perfect like the beautiful wedding is.
Well, and as we mentioned, I don't know, a few episodes ago, unlike when you get married when, you're young or, first marriage or whatnot, often with blended families, it's literally blending. But not just the family, you're blending houses, you're blending stuff that you acquired, you're blending sometimes, having to move jobs or job locations. Like there's a lot of non-romance in blending a family when you get to that marriage, when you've committed, when you've said, hey, we're actually going to do this. Yeah, there is this there's this real piece, this pragmatic piece of, okay, how do we do it? When you're young, it's like, we don't care how we're going to do it, and we just want to live together, and we just want to sleep together, and we just want to cuddle and snuggle. And
wow.
But blended families tend to appreciate that and acknowledge that there's another piece to this.
Right. There might not be time for all the snuggling and cuddling.
Right. Or we got to make time. Like we got to set dates. Like we're going to snuggle Thursday at 8,
Because the kids might be at the other person's house.
For 15 minutes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So there's just a lot. There's just more layers to getting married when you're entering into a blended family.
Right. And you're older and you've done it before. And so you go in with these expectations that this is going to be different this time. You have just these goals that you're going to have with your spouse, that we're going to be more communicative. We're going to spend a lot of time together. We're going to know each other's love languages really, really well.
Everything that, was missing in my first marriage, or everything that I fell short with my first marriage, or everything that, maybe I was unaware of, I'm not going to do those things. Like you create these lists. And then you realize, no, marriage is hard regardless because you're dealing with people. And and as we mentioned, I think last episode, blended marriage is I think even potentially more complicated because of all the baggage you're bringing in, because it's typically older people. They've been through much more in terms of highs and lows. Mm-hmm. And so you're bringing all of that in, including, not the least of which for many is kids.
Well, and you have habits from your prior marriage that are already habits. And so you haven't really necessarily broken them because your marriage is over or ended in some fashion. And so now you haven't had a chance to break those habits because you haven't had time to practice them. Right. So those will probably come back up.
But not only come back up, but they will typically come back up even more pronounced, because it's a part. Not only is it a part of who you are, but you get to try them out on someone new.
Maybe they'll like them.
Right. And so you go through this like season of if you're the recipient of your new spouse's demeanors or habits, you tend to there's a period of grace, there's a period of, oh, that's cute, there's a period of, like we all did with our first marriages. And so you may take those blind spots or those things that you do that might not be as glorifying to God as they should be, and you try them out on your new spouse, knowing that you do get that grace period. You also get, to your point, maybe they will actually have a different response than my first spouse.
I don't put the toothpaste lid back on the toothpaste, and that drove my ex-spouse crazy. And you're okay with that, seemingly.
So this episode is brought to you by Crest, and we are about to talk about how much I dislike the fact that there are 3 tubes of toothpaste in our drawer right now. The actual drawer is covered with, like, I don't know if you've ever been to Seattle where they have that wall with gum.
Wall, yes.
This is the cabinet with toothpaste, old blobs of toothpaste, because Jen just doesn't see the need to screw on a cap. And so, and use the entire bottle of toothpaste.
I use most of it.
The tube.
I squish it anyway. I guess that bothers you.
You just break out another tube and leave the old tube in there.
I do. No, I
and
throw
we
it
have
away.
3 or 4 caps just floating around in that cabinet.
Anyway.
I'll tell you, it does make access to the toothpaste easier.
Well, because you got options. Yes, for sure.
No, and so I think it really, the upside, because I don't want our listeners thinking, gosh, these guys, like, all they do is throw rocks at blended marriages. The upside is, prayerfully, you've also, in your time in your first marriage or just growing older, have acquired skill sets that maybe you didn't have when you were younger, including patience, including long suffering, including forgiveness, including mercy, including quick to listen, slow to speak. And maybe included in that is what are the hills I'm going to die on, and what are the hills that, you know what, honestly, it's a tube of toothpaste. Like, buy a new drawer and be done with it. I mean, you're dealing with, again, so many other things that probably should take a more of a front row seat in terms of, if I'm going to fight about something, it might not be about the toothpaste. It might be about, how we're parenting, or our financial stability, or, how we're going to deal with kids that are now growing older and all they're going through. Like, it might be around those things. If you're in a blended family and you're still looking at things like the toothpaste as that was our knockdown drag out last night, I would probably keep listening, I guess. Keep listening to this podcast, other podcasts that will help you. Keep reading books about blended families and marriage, because you're at a point maybe where you're going to bring unnecessary friction and problems into your second marriage. And second marriages have a higher divorce rate than first marriages. Third marriages have a higher divorce rate than first or second marriages. Like, it doesn't get better just because you're in a new relationship.
No, I like what you say there, because I think being in a blended family and then remarrying again has taught me a tremendous amount of patience and a tremendous amount about self-reflection. And I think when you jump in as a young person and get married, it takes a lot of wisdom and mentoring from older people to say, hey, maybe you should self-reflect about this. How are you guys doing with communication? Because you really don't know that going in. You've watched your parents do marriage, but you've never experienced it. And so as you are young married, maybe you do forget you don't really know how to communicate yet. But as a second marriage, you know that that's important. And so having, like, I guess, the correct expectations set up as you come in, like healthy boundaries, healthy goals set up, will help you be successful, because it will teach you a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
And that's great. We want to learn about ourselves.
Well, and the best way we learn about ourselves is growing in the Lord.
Right.
And again, prayerfully, you're a little older, you've had more time in the Word, you've had more time to let the Spirit convict you about things, you've had more time to humble yourself. I think, honestly, the older you get, the more you realize there is nothing new under the sun. I'm working toward, if not already at the midway point in life, maybe even past the midway point. Like you kind of settle into why am I still participating in those old habits that did not do us well in our first marriage? Like what's the value to prove a point, to win, to show the other person that I'm still capable of fighting? Like, I mean, I was reading recently Desiring God Ministries, great ministry, and one of the senior writers said Ephesians 4:32 is his favorite verse for his marriage, which says, "Be kind to one another, be tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you." And he said that, like, that is, again, can be applied to friends, it can be applied to family, it can be applied to coworkers. It's for Christians to look at other Christians and say, you have the opportunity when you interface with someone, when you interact with someone, when you're in someone's company, to do these things: forgive, be tenderhearted, and be kind. And if you put that up against your second marriage or your third marriage, you probably just assumed that in your first marriage. Now, maybe again, 7 years in, 10 years in to your first marriage, we have great friends that are 20 years in, 25 years in. They'll look at that verse and say, well, yeah, that's what I do with my spouse. But typically in your first marriage, years 1 to 5, maybe, you're not exactly pasting that on the wall saying, this is our marriage verse. It's typically 1 Corinthians 13 or something about leaving and cleaving. It's not necessarily be kind, be tenderhearted, be forgiving. And it's because I think in that context, Paul is telling the church at Ephesus, that's to everyone. And what we do in our first marriage is we tend to look at those marriage verses like, yeah, that's good for fellowship and for my small group or men's group or women's group, but not for my marriage. I want something better for my marriage, like something more romantic for my marriage, something more like husbands love your wives like Christ loved the church, or something where I can say, I'm a husband, you're a wife. That I would argue Ephesians 4:32, if most people applied that to their first marriage, barring death, but if you're divorced for some reason, I would argue the number of divorces in Christian homes would go down tremendously if that verse was applied to your first marriage, asterisk, comma, by both people, not just by one person.
Absolutely agree.
Right? But if both people applied that verse, man, how's your marriage? I don't know, he's not the funniest guy on the planet, but he's kind to me. How's your marriage? Well, she's not, I don't know, she put on a pound or two, but she's tenderhearted. Like, hey, we forgive one another. And all of a sudden you're into 20, 25, 30, 35 years in your marriage, rather than at year 7, the proverbial itch. Hey, why are we fighting all the time? Why are we struggling all the time? Why are we arguing about the toothpaste? Probably because you're not applying Ephesians 4:32 among other verses.
Well, I was also reading Ron Deal's some of his stuff, and he is the what did we say? Like the father of blended families. I
Guru.
feel like the guru
Yeah.
of blended families. He's
Patriarch.
just, yes, he has such a tremendous amount of resources online through Family Life, and then also his own personal website that just really focuses on how do you do blended families well. And
Yep.
so love to reach out and look at his stuff, because I just think they have such depth to them. And,
Oh, yeah.
And so I was looking at one of his things, and it brought back one of the things that we did when we got married, which was the sand ceremony at our wedding. And the reason that we did the sand ceremony, I think probably it was popular back then in 2013.
Yeah,
It
those
was
things
kinda
go
come out then.
I mean, I officiate weddings, and so I always ask the couples, hey, there's a moment where you may want to take advantage of everyone being there and watching you guys get married, and symbolically it means something, but also something tangible you can take home. And yeah, I've been doing weddings for, I don't know, 20, 25 years now. And it goes through like seasons, like
trends.
what's
Trending.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've had
now.
the candle that's been around
Yeah, it was
forever, two
ever.
candles into one. The braided rope. People will do the
yes.
3 cords that are not easily broken.
Right.
I've had
What was recent?
I've had water where people have taken 2 colors of water and put it into clear water, and then it becomes a third color.
Oh.
That we're now one.
Very sciencey.
But yeah, we went with sand.
Yes. And the reason that we went with sand is because it's like everybody has their say, like they get to put their color into the vase. And
Yeah.
what I loved about what I was watching on Ron Deal's, he had a video he was sharing on YouTube about this, is that I guess what brought to mind is that as you're sitting there with your blended family, like our kids were part of our wedding ceremony. I had junior bridesmaid with Malia, and then the boys were junior groomsmen. And so they all were able to participate.
And they were the only
They were the only people who stood up with us.
that
Yes.
stood up in our wedding. Yeah.
And at that time we had been dating 2 years. I mean, it was,
Yep. On
they
and
knew
off.
each other. That's another episode. The time away,
Right.
Greg and Jen's
That's right.
separation. And so we had allowed them to pick out their own color and be a part of the sand ceremony. And he was talking about how there's the husband and wife color, and then there's the kids' colors, and then if it's a widower or a widow, that that child is thinking about that parent, but there's no vase to put a color into. Not that the ceremony, but just metaphorically speaking. And then you've got the other spouse or the ex-spouse over here with a sand color, and he was like, this kid wants to put his stuff and that, all of it in that, because he's not connecting with stepdad because he really likes real dad and he doesn't want stepdad to be a part of his life. And so mom's like, wait, but put your sand in our vase. And so what it brought, and I do have to show for our viewers who are online, our sand, as I get this up here, here's our sand ceremony thing. And those of you who are listening, we have white, purple, green, dark blue, orange, pink, and light blue. And it's in this very large vase that's way too big for all the sand to be in, quite honestly. And then couple of things. One, it's perfectly laid. If you look at it, it's beautiful. It's like a mosaic of sand. It's like there's nothing intertwined, right?
Yeah.
None of the sand is messing into the other part. So everybody's piece is nice and pretty,
Right.
which is not the case in a blended family at all.
No.
Nothing's nice and pretty.
No.
And then secondly, I can imagine what's going through a kid's mind as they're like, you want me to put sand in a vase and what?
Yeah.
And the parents are like, this is a beautiful ceremony. And the kid's going, I don't even know what I'm getting into here.
Right.
And so I started thinking, like, what is the kid thinking when that kid is trying to put their sand in the vase and thinking, I don't really want to blend, but I'm in front of everybody and maybe I do want to blend. Maybe I'm super
Yeah.
excited about this. So much going through that child's, and they don't have experiential wisdom because they've never been married.
Right.
So they don't even know what they're getting into.
Yeah, the upside to that picture with the way we did it, because there's a lot of downsides. The upside is you see each color represented in its own unique, like you said, they're not blended. So sometimes the mistake I think families make when they blend a family is that you're going to have to lose your identity and become part of this new family. And like in our case, your two boys have a different last name. And so it's, is it Zach Tonkinson? Is it Luke Tonkinson? No, their last name is Chalmers. And so when you get into these moments where it's like, hey, this kid is 7 years old or 6 years old, pour the sand in. And admittedly, Jen and we didn't think about that as much as Ron Deal thinks about it in terms of what the colors represent. And there's actual colors for different, we just said to the kids, hey, we're going to do the sand ceremony. Pick a color.
Pick your favorite color, right?
Yeah. And then once that color's gone, you can't pick it, and so the kids all picked a color. Believe me, I promise you this to those about to get into, this, whether it's your first or second or third marriage, this thing sits on our shelf. We haven't looked at it in probably 7 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
It collects dust. We can't throw it away just because it would be weird, I think, to throw it away.
Bad.
But it serves no purpose. And so if you think that you're going to do something during your ceremony that's just going to be one, revolutionary, and two, it's going to be a reminder as it sits on your shelf, with the kids are going to walk by and say, oh my gosh, I'm a part. I promise you, it's probably not going to happen. It's for the moment. And so whatever you do it and enjoy it, but don't put too much stock into it like this is somehow going to make things better or make things different. Our kids did the stacked version. And so the downside of that is you are communicating visually that we are 7 independent people. And that's not healthy. We don't want that to be our kids' position, is that you're independent and you can do your own thing. Because blended families struggle with that. One of the things they struggle with is kids feeling like they're not a part of the new family because of, whatever skill sets or their personalities or whatnot. So you don't want that to happen. But on the other hand, when I see people taking, blue water and pink water, I guess creating purple water or something, I get the idea of the two shall become one. But also you are then no longer blue or you're no longer pink. Now you're both purple. And that's not exactly biblical, because the Bible never says that you lose your identity.
True.
In fact, the Bible says your identity as a believer's in Jesus. And so, but you still retain your skill sets and personality and so there's no good example. There's no good picture that I've seen.
No, I can't.
And yet I get why people do it, including why we did it.
Right. Yeah. I can't think of one that would be a better depiction. I'm
that
thinking now.
vase is
It's
huge.
huge. I think we got it at
What were you
IKEA.
thinking?
It was an IKEA vase. It's great. I love IKEA.
I actually do remember.
I think you got it.
I probably did. And I actually remember when our second kid, I don't know, it was first or second kid, started pouring their sand in, I realized this isn't going to fill that thing up. It's not even going to get
sand.
It's not even going to get halfway there. And sure enough, we got done, and it's like, wah, wah, where's the rest of it?
And then I'm like, where am I going to put this massive vase in my house?
It's massive. Yeah. So it sits somewhere in our bedroom or somewhere.
It's in the hallway.
Oh, is it in the hallway?
Greg doesn't know because Greg hasn't seen it. Because it's kind of hidden, but that's actually a good point. We aren't focused on that, and I love what you said, that the kids come in with their own identities, and we want to celebrate those identities because that's how they've grown up, and so ripping that away from them in a marriage because this is your home now.
Right.
And you have to be this way when you're here and this way when you're at your other home. It's too much for a kid to process. They're already just processing that mommy and daddy aren't married anymore. And now, and I mean, they may be older and they're not saying mommy and daddy anymore, but still it's hard. It's a loss of an expectation for that child. And so now they may be very excited about the new marriage that's happening, and kids love adventure, and they are curious by nature.
Yeah.
And so I can see how it would feel positive coming in, but I really think it's important for blended families to just set some precedences for your household, and know that as a teacher, I say this, when your child goes to the other household and comes back, it is an emotional transition every single time.
Yeah.
And I can always tell when my students have gone back and forth because they're just kind of off a little bit in that day. And especially the younger kids. Now, I don't know about high schoolers are pretty good at hiding their emotions, but when it comes like junior high, they're all out there with their emotions, and it's hard.
Well, and we're going to have some guests on over the next couple of episodes. I'm super excited, Brian and Chris Dunn, because they're going to come in. The Dunns are going to come in. They're in a blended family. And unlike our blended family, they do split time or I think their kids are older now, but they did on both sides. And so we want to just dive in with them as to, again, when you say you're in a blended family, then when we nuance that to, the Dunns were living quite the different life than the Tonkinsons were, and not better, not worse, just different. We want to expose all of our listeners to the various types of blended families. And so if you're in a blended family situation where there is split time, there is joint custody, please tune in to the next couple of episodes, because you're going to hear firsthand from a couple on how they dealt with it. Their kids are now, I think most of them, if not all of them, are out of the house. And so they're past that point of new kiddos, but they experienced that, and they're graciously coming on the show to talk about that. And the reason that I believe it's so important is because what we do on this show, and again, we great, with great open hands say, go to people like Ron Deal's website, go to read books like, Dobson's, and pick up other resources that will help you. And maybe Unwanted Fraternity can play a very small part in that, gives you something to talk about, something to think about. But there are people that's all they focus on are blended families. And believe me, Jen and I are 12 years into our blended family, going on 13. We can tell you firsthand, if you don't get out in front of this, it will get out in front of you. And if you're at all concerned about the health and well-being of your kids, the health and well-being of your spouse, the health and well-being of you, then take drastic measures, so much more than you probably even thought you needed to, in conferences, in books, in small groups, in blended family Sunday schools. Go to things like Divorce Care or Grief Share. Get the help you need, counseling, couples counseling, so that even if it's preventative, your kids come into an environment that's peaceful. Your kids come into an environment that's consistent. They come into an environment that they can expect certain things. And even with all of the turbulence that they experience from bouncing from house to house and splitting time and all of that, even if you can't control your ex-spouse's environment, you can control yours. And I know that's easier said than done, but I promise you the payoff will be huge when they turn 18, 19, 20, and they're out of the house and look back and say, yeah, it wasn't perfect, but I really do appreciate all the hard work my mom and stepdad or stepmom and dad did to provide for me an environment that was as best as it could be.
So something that I'd like to talk a little bit about as before we have our guest on next couple of episodes is how do you get into that marriage? So now you're in your marriage. How do you set up house rules and boundaries for your home, knowing that, and I want them to share a little bit about what did they do when their kids went to the other houses because
Yep.
they're different rules. But you have to create a space in your own home that is how you act when you're in this space because biblically speaking, the husband is the head of the household, and there is a co-partnership with parenting of that person, whether that be a step parent or a biological parent. And the respect of that household, first and foremost, goes to the Lord, and then it goes to the parents. And so the children need to know where they stand in that line of hierarchy in that home. And that sounds very like formal and strict, but setting down with your spouse and saying, okay, what are our house rules? And I will say for Greg and me, we did not have the option of sharing a home with someone else. And so our kids were 100% with us all the time. And that created a very different type of environment for them because both parties, both sets of children were now coming in under a new parental guidance without having a deep, deep relationship with that person. They had a surfacey relationship because we had been dating. So now they're in a home together and they have to work together with new siblings and new parental guidance. And that creates a very different kind of environment because it's a day after day after day. Like there's no reprieve to go to the other parent's house and like have new rules and fun rules. And so Greg and I really did have to talk through that. And I really don't want to touch on discipline just yet because I think that will be in a next episode because that's a pretty heavy topic. But just like coming into our home, blending our home together, we moved into my house. I had purchased this house with the two boys when I moved to Colorado. I'm from Colorado to Arizona. And so it, by God's grace, had the plenty of room. We were amazed at how it just fit everyone in here. So everybody had their space, and something that we wanted to do, and something I think is important for when kids do come into your home, is set new traditions or set something that's like special for them in that home. And so I wanted to create a space in their rooms that was very much their personality. And so gathering that information from each child, like what do you really want your room to look like, so that they were really excited about that. Because for Greg's kids, they were coming into a new home, leaving their old home behind, which had a ton of memories, especially of their mom. And so I wanted their room to include their mom. For one, I wanted I wanted them to have their pictures up and feel like when they went into their space that it was a safe place for them to have grief or to have joy, but just to be, to feel comfortable. And so asking like, what color do you want your room? What do you want your bedding to look like? Those kind of things are very important to little kids. So creating that kind of environment for them helps. And then also like, what are your traditions going to be and what are your rules going to be in the house? For us, we did create new traditions with like holidays. We kept some old ones because we wanted them to feel like the nostalgia of having that from the past. We always sat at the table together. We said that was super important to come home from school. Greg and I both teach, and so they were riding to school with us. But coming together at the end of the day, and what would we do at the table? Do you remember?
We would go around and
say
what?
What would we say at the table? What would we talk about? What were your we would talk about your highs and lows of the day.
Correct. Yeah. One of the kids would say, okay, let's go over highs and lows. Yeah. And then they'd pick a kid. And then there were times as well when we went around, and especially on birthdays or whatnot, like one thing we appreciate about that person. And again, like, how does that play out? Because now, whatever it is, 12 years later, we just did a family staycation, and we were at this nice restaurant and having a great time, and we went around the table, and in this time we actually decided we were going to say like what animal that person best represents. But that was commonplace because we had been doing it a lot.
Right. Now, everybody's super comfortable with that.
Those who are listening, and especially our own kids, they will listen to this episode and think, yeah, and I can name 50 times where there were arguments at the table or there was silence at the table. Absolutely. We're not painting a picture of, hey, follow what we did because what we did was perfect. We're saying that if you don't take initiative, I was reading in Luke 14, if you want to build a tower, who doesn't sit down first and estimate the cost and see if you have the money to complete it? Like if you don't plan, then you're 2 steps behind. And so get together before you tie the knot, get together with your future spouse and just lay out the realities of your situation. If it's joint custody, if it's split time, if it's full custody. But I would agree with Jen that in a Christian couple's case, the Bible has to be the final authority. It cannot be, well, God doesn't understand our situation, or we're going to do things different regardless of what the Bible says. If you believe that the Bible is clear on the roles of husbands, wives, and parents and kids, then regardless of how you got into your marriage, those still apply. So husbands, you're still to fulfill your roles as husbands in a blended family, in a non-blended family. Wives, you're still to fulfill your roles. Kids, you're still to fulfill your roles. And parents, you're still to fulfill your roles. So many times in blended family groups that Jen and I have been in, we've just seen such a departure from that for the reason of, well, you don't understand my situation. And so I'm going to be the only one who parents my kids because that's what they're used to, or they came out of a rough situation and I don't want them being introduced to another person's authority or whatever it may be. And I'm like, okay, I don't see that biblically. Like I see that empathetically. I see that experientially and anecdotally, but I don't see that biblically. And so I would ask and ask every Christian couple out there who's about to get into a blended family, let the Bible do the heavy lifting for you, and just admit, yeah, this isn't when we talk about kids obeying your parents. If you have now assumed the role of parent in your blended family, then kids are commanded by God to obey those parents, period. There's no, but he's not my real dad or she's not my real mom. If we're qualifying that person as a parent, as a guardian in your home, then you have the responsibility to obey them, regardless of how you got into that situation. Parents, dads, do not exasperate your kids to anger. Ephesians 6:4, I believe. Same thing. Well, that's my stepkid. You don't understand. My stepkid's a knucklehead or whatever, or they're not respecting me, or, that's not what the Bible says. It says fathers and then to children. Well, they're not my bio kid. Yeah, they're your kid though. If we consider the nuclear family and we include the blended family in that, they are a part of your family. Mm-hmm. And so those biblical rules, commands, declarations still apply. And I really do think if husbands and wives, as they enter into this new union with one another, would just agree to that, rather than try to fight it and try to figure out a way that it doesn't apply to them, I think you're off to a great start. Just agree that the Bible is the Word of God, regardless of my situation, and I'm going to apply the same commands to marriage that I would in any other situation. And I think you're off to a great start.
I think that also, to add to that, yes, kids need to obey their parents, and then you're right, that person is now the parent figure in that household. But I think there also needs to be included the uniqueness of being in a blended family is that there is a lot more empathy than if you're in a traditional family. And I say that because there's comfort in the traditional family. And so you're like used to each other. You've grown up with each other.
Well, they're a part of you.
Yeah.
DNA wise.
Yeah. And, but now that you're in the blended family, it is really difficult sometimes to relate to that stepchild. I remember coming into, early on, and I was so excited to have a daughter. And, I thought, gosh, I can't believe I get to buy girl clothes and do all this fun stuff. And I remember telling you, I don't know how to make it feel natural to me.
Right.
Like I want, cause I have my biological connection with my two boys, and it's just a feeling. It's a comfort feeling.
Correct.
And I really wanted that with your kids as well. And of course, Caden was like 13. So that was more of a friendship type. I mean, it was a different type of dynamic. I'm not going to go like rub his back before he goes to bed kind of thing. I think he'd been like, you can step away, please. But for like Malia and Bailey, they were young, and I just thought I want to build that same tradition that I have, that closeness I have with my kids. And I remember telling you, like, I just can't feel it. It's not inside of me. I want it so much. And it really grieved me.
Yep.
But that just takes time and intentionality. And it isn't always perfect. I mean, there aren't going to be, like, sometimes you're just going to look at your stepchild and be like, we are super great friends, but I don't have that like deep heart connection sometimes with you. I don't understand sometimes what you do. But keep trying to be intentional about that growth. Find something that's just your thing with that person.
Yeah, I absolutely. And again, those passages don't refer to any kind of feeling, in the sense of, ideally, every single parent would have the same feeling toward their kid, and the kid would have toward their parent. Now, again, realistically, most biological parents have that with their kids. There's a connection there. There's an intrinsic bond there. There is, when that kid comes out of the womb, there is a supernatural, mystical feeling, a bonding that takes place, and most parents can't explain it, but they know it's true. Mm-hmm. You get into a blended family, and you're right. It's like, I'm looking at this kid, and I carry the title now, but I'm not sure about the connection. I'm not sure about this natural feeling. Absolutely. And I would say to blended families about to go into people about to go into a marriage that's a blended family, and I would say even a blended marriage, even if you don't have kids, recognize that you're up against some really difficult future moments because of that. Like, that alone, when you have kids, and that's just a natural, like, when your kids came out of the womb, you didn't ask God, or you didn't, read enough books to where it's like, oh, I feel this way about my kid because I did X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. You just felt that way. So don't take credit for that blessing that God gives you of bonding with your kid, your biological kid. That's a gift from God, and we didn't even deserve it, but he gave it to us. Mm-hmm. One of the realities of a blended family, and this is why, again, I just don't think it was God's ideal plan, is that I'm looking at people now that I have to work hard. I have to go the extra mile. And I will say this, you can gain that feeling. You can gain that relationship. You can, at the end of the day, look at people that you never thought you'd be close with, that at the beginning it felt like you was pulling teeth, that you stared, gave each other the evil eye or the side stare. And now a few years later, maybe several years later, you're like besties, mm-hmm. or you're like, I can't see my life without this person. Like, it's very, very possible. But the road to get there is not like a biological road. Mm-mm. In most cases. It is hard work. It is tilling the soil. It is on your knees almost every day. It's a whole bunch of, is this even worth it? And then you get that moment where maybe the kid says mom or dad, or they lean into you, or they hug you in a way that you feel like is different, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And then you look back and say, God, thank you. Like, it's happening. I would say, circling all the way back, be aware that that's what's going to happen, and then work toward making it happen as quicker than maybe it will if you don't work at it. Can God work miracles? Absolutely. But God gives us tools and resources including his word, obviously, and then other resources to help us along the way in areas of patience, in areas of understanding, in areas of discipline, in areas of authority. And it would benefit a blended family so much if they just sat down early in the blended family marriage and sat down with the kiddos as a family unit to say, hey, this may seem formal, this may seem a little unnatural, but we're going to lay out some Tonkinson Chalmer family rules. We're going to lay out some roles that Jen and I play. We're going to lay out and it's like, we didn't do that with our bio families. Yeah, it's a different family.
Right.
And I believe it's necessary to do that early on so that it's clear. Like, we've thought about this, we've prayed about this, we believe God's word is telling us this, and so we're going to apply it to this new family. And the kids may balk at that, they may fight that, husbands and wives may fight it, but I really do believe that's best practice.
No, that is great. And that just opens up that line of communication, which is so important when you get into a blended family. Well, I'm really excited about our guests that we're going to have on.
It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. And then after that, we're hoping to have a couple of our kids come on and talk about their perspective. And then, of course, we're going to tackle this as a topic of discipline in the blended family, because there are many different philosophies on that. So stay tuned for that. Well, thank you for joining us today on Unwanted Fraternity podcast. We have many resources for you to reach out to us. If you have a story to share, we would love to hear from you. We are on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. You may also DM us on those. You can go to our website at unwantedfraternity.com and reach out to us through that. You can also contact us at unwantedfraternity@gmail.com and leave us an email, but we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay strong in that blended family pursuit that you're on, because you are not alone. We'll see you next time.
Turn on the mic, the static clears. Unwanted brotherhood of tears. Grief can weigh us down alone, but here we find a common home. The voices speak to heart and soul. In darker times they make us whole. Through Jesus' light we find our way. In every night, there comes a day. From shadows to the dawn we rise. Hope reflected in our